They are the ones, Mr. Speaker, who refuse to engage in meaningful legislative work to get the job done here. We won't be lectured by our colleague that we don't stand up for the American people.
The new Congress just started, and House Republicans are sparing no time making good on Trump's insane immigrant policies.
Day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out.
To do that, Trump has said he'll mobilize the military and local police.
They've just passed their first piece of policy with the Laken Riley Act, despite the family of Laken Riley openly telling them that they do not want their daughter used for political purposes. As you can imagine, the Republicans have very little regard for people's well-being, and instead passed the act, demonizing any Democrats who didn't vote for the bill, even though when you take a look at what they actually passed, there isn't much in here that's going to protect Americans, and instead raises some pretty big constitutional concerns regarding a single state's ability to restrict visas from an entire country. If you're liking the coverage here at Really American, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're liking the video, leave a like and tell me what you think down in the comments. So despite striking down the truly bipartisan border bill just last year, House Republicans were desperate to push through the Laken Riley Act, hoping to use the tragic death of a nurse at the hand of an illegal immigrant in order to shame Democrats into passing an outrageously unconstitutional bill.
What is your response to how or will you work with Democrats on something more comprehensive that could get bipartisan support?
Yeah, the Laken Riley Act was bipartisan. Leader Scalise is reminding me behind me, 37 Democrats did vote for that.
But you know it's at 100 or someone...
170 voted against it. And I think they put politics ahead of principle. And we're going to find out where they stand on this now. Look, we have every intention of doing really important bipartisan work in the Congress. To be frank, I was heartened when Leader Jeffries, in his opening remarks before he introduced me to give my speaker's speech, that he noted some of this. He noted border and other things. We'll see. It can't be just empty rhetoric. It's got to be action. And we're going to give them the opportunity to take action with this. Look, we welcome with open arms any Democrat who wants to help us solve these problems because the American people demand and deserve it. It's overdue. And we'll be looking for that, and we'll see how it shakes out.
I always think it's so ironic when Republicans say something is overdue. They're the reason why it's overdue. Disrupting and delaying is kind of their whole thing. Instead, what they're interested in is attaching a crime and the victim of a crime, a person, a human being, someone who had hopes and dreams and aspirations, someone who did not choose to spend their life being associated with illegal immigration. They've taken her name, they've taken her image, and they've associated it with this.
Do you think a difference in immigration policy would have made a difference for Laken?
We have no idea if that would have changed anything, but it's incited people who are going to have a vote in November, and I think it's being used politically to get those votes.
How do you feel about that?
It makes me angry. She should be raised up for the person that she is.
And that, to me, is so tasteless and disgusting that I can't believe 48 Democrats really signed this bill. Here's Jamie Raskin, with all of his flaws, perfectly laying out exactly what's wrong with this anti-immigration bill. This clip is a little long, but I'm going to speed it up because I think he makes some important points.
Their bill today is an empty and opportunistic measure. It's not like the compromise they tanked in the last Congress, a bill for greater border security, or for better technology in the ports of entry, or for expanding legal pathways to immigration and citizenship for millions of people, or for addressing huge immigrant visa backlogs. No. This bill would upend 28 years of mandatory immigration detention policy by requiring that any undocumented immigrant arrested for theft, larceny, or shoplifting be detained even if they are never convicted or even charged with a crime. Under this bill, a person who's lived in the United States for decades, say for most of her life, paid taxes and bought a home, but who was mistakenly arrested for shoplifting, would not be free to resume her life, but rather would be detained and deported even if the charges are dropped and even if the police admit that the arrest was mistaken. This bill tries to give states standing to sue for harms as small as $100, dramatically shifting power from the executive branch to the courts and the federal government to the states, both in ways considered completely dubious by the Supreme Court. Like many of the immigration-related bills the GOP is now advancing, this one seems to follow a simple strategy. Pick a crime, paste into it a template immigration law covering convicted criminals, and then require detention or deportation of certain persons merely accused of committing the crime or arrested for committing the crime. No due process required at all. We are asked to vote on a bill that fails to address any of the real issues at stake, and we are foreclosed from offering any amendments to improve this sloppy and political product. I urge all colleagues to oppose this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
So, as he described, there's a few problems with this legislation. One, it all but removes due process for illegal immigrants who are arrested. Two, it gives way too much power to the judiciary in states over an issue that the Supreme Court has already decided is a power vested in the federal executive. And three, it doesn't actually do anything to quell the issues of illegal immigration. The Republicans' entire argument revolves around the idea that because the man who killed Laken Riley was once arrested for shoplifting, they should have deported him then, and that would have prevented the murder of Laken Riley. And while that might be true in this one anecdote, it does nothing to prevent future murders, unless you assume that any illegal immigrant who may commit murder is first going to get caught for shoplifting. If they actually cared about preventing the situation, instead of this reactionary policy, they would have improved the process processes by which somebody can come through legally, which makes it a lot easier to vet and verify people who are in this country. The current system encourages people to come illegally, so we don't know who's in the country, which makes it a lot easier for the Republicans to fearmonger and get stuff like this passed.
There's just no other way to put it. Her death is a direct result of President Biden's deliberate refusal to enforce our laws.
David Beer, who is a director of immigration studies at the Cato Institute, had a really good thread about this that I want to cover. The Laken-Riley Act pretends to be about stopping illegal immigrants who commit crimes. In fact, it's a Trojan horse designed to destroy legal migration because nativists cannot help themselves. They simply don't care about illegal immigration as much as legal immigration. The Lincoln-Riley Act requires detention/removal of illegal immigrant thieves. Great, though ICE is already attempting to do so, so it's basically irrelevant, which is a great point. The Republicans will rail and rail and rail on how immigrants get free stuff, how immigrant criminals are somehow let free, as if we don't already have systems of punitive justice that catch and convict these people. We don't need additional legislation to make something that's already illegal. The real purpose of the bill is something completely different, empowering state government to sue to stop immigration. Mind you, legal immigration. The Lincoln-Riley Act lets states sue to stop parole of immigrants, letting them enter and reside legally in the U.S. It defines harm from the parolees to a state as any cost of $100. No, that's not net harm from immigration. That's any cost whatsoever of $100. Even if the benefits are 1,000 times. State AGs will be able to sue over $100 costs from legal immigrants who entered on visas from any country that doesn't fully coordinate with deportations from the US, including Russia, India, Cambodia, Cuba, Hong Kong, India, Iran. Aside from people entering for humanitarian reasons, this would potentially affect advanced parole of hundreds of thousands of skilled immigrants. The LRA will do nothing to stop illegal immigration, but will devastate legal immigration. What's important to understand is that the Supreme Court has already said that states do not have standing to sue over this issue, and yet this act is an attempt to give states standing for as little as damages over $100. So what's going to happen when they do sue? Well, like Aaron posted here, the Trojan horse comment here is about a section of the bill, which has gone completely under the radar, that would allow a single district court judge in Texas to seek a court order banning all visas from countries like India or China, because those countries don't always cooperate with deportations. It could create an international incident. So let's look a little bit more specifically at the language in the bill. So the act starts with blaming Biden for Laken-Riley's murder. Really nice. It details that illegal immigrants who commit theft should be arrested, which we already do. And this is the interesting section that gives state attorney general way more power than they need. It makes changes to the Immigration and Nationality Act, amending it so that state attorneys general can sue the Secretary of Homeland Security on behalf of the state in order to force them to make certain actions that are detailed in the Immigration and Nationality Act, meaning that if any state attorney general decides that they disagree with the Homeland Security's lack of action, then they can sue to have that action taken. Those actions include the release of any alien or grant of any bond or parole to any alien that harms such state or its residents. Again, harm means in all of these cases as little as $100. It includes a violation of the requirement to discontinue granting visas to citizens, subjects, nationals, and residents as described in Section D. That section, as detailed here, essentially forces the Secretary of State to discontinue granting any visas to a country that refuses or delays the deportation of any of its citizens. Generally, this is an action that can be taken by the Attorney General, but this act would allow state attorney generals to force this action. So you can see that the language in this entire act is essentially just trying to give states' attorney generals standing in a lawsuit against Homeland Security in order to force them and the Secretary of State into locking down visas from certain countries if there's an issue with just one deportation, since any deportation is logically going to cost the state more than $100. But the scary part about this act is that 48 Democrats caved. They let rhetoric like this get the best of them.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 29, the Laken-Riley Act. For the past 4 years, the American people have suffered under the Biden administration's disastrous open border policies that have allowed millions of illegal aliens to flood our communities. We must not allow our security to depend on whether or not a Republican occupies the White House.
But luckily, not all Democrats caved. There are still a few who are willing to call this what it is.
Republicans turned away, it's a good question, Republicans turned away a bipartisan opportunity for border security and immigration reform. I didn't love every piece of it. I stood at this podium and told you all that I didn't love every detail of it, but I also said I would have voted for it. So they do not have a rich track record in working to solve these issues. You heard Leader Jeffries in his speech the other day, and I have said multiple times, the Vice Chair said, we will work to make lives better for our constituents and everyday Americans. That's our responsibility and our mandate. If they present us with an opportunity to do that, we will consider it. If it is genuine bipartisanship, we will consider it. But what we have seen from them is just reciting it time and time again, anti-immigrant rhetoric, and then wrapped in a policy bow that they present. That's not going to do it. But if they genuinely want to do this, I've got a track record in working with Republicans, many who have since come and gone from the chamber on real reform. In that case, that was DACA and border security reform. There are serious members on the other side of the aisle who may want to have discussions about that. There are also very unserious members on the other side of the aisle. They have no interest in working in a bipartisan way. They just want to be on Fox News and they just want to be loved by Donald Trump. We will see which House Republicans emerge when it comes to immigration as a policy topic.
And as far as the future of the act in the Senate, luckily, Senate Democrats are signaling that they won't be supporting it. Here's a quote from Senator Chris Murphy. "I just don't think it's a good bill. I think it's going to make the immigration system written as is much, much, much more complicated, Byzantine, and confusing. Because of this new right it provides for attorneys general, it's just not a well-constructed piece of legislation. We can only hope that this anti-immigrant rhetoric isn't enough to flip any more Democrats in the Senate and get this awful bill in front of President Trump. He'd put his name on that thing faster than the stimulus checks." I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.